This video will be a bit different from what I have done, and I'm going to talk about the Star Wars canon. One big plot point, one very overlooked plot point of Star Wars is the theme of genocide. One essential plot point of Star Wars, but also one very overlooked plot point of Star Wars, is genocide. In A New Hope, it happened to Alderaan, and in Star Wars Rebels, it happened to the Geonosians. They went blown up, they were gassed. This happened in Season 3. And I'm going to explore that, and how uncomfortably strange the Geonosian species are overlooked as insects, as insignificant beings that aren't worthy of life. Gregory H. Stanton came up with the 10 stages of genocide, and I'm going to go through that in terms of how the Geonosians from the prequels ended up being exterminated by the Empire eventually. How did they get to that point, and why was it so easy? The 10 stages consist of these. Stage 1, classification. Stage 2, symbolisation. Stage 3, discrimination. Stage 4, dehumanisation. Stage 5, organisation. Stage 6, polarisation. Stage 7, preparation. Stage 8, persecution. Stage 9, extermination. Stage 10, denial. Stage 9 is where the actual extermination, the actual genocide occurs. All other stages, except for the denial part, are slow policies and social shifts that allow these atrocities to occur. So where does this happen in Star Wars with the Geonosians? I want to explore how, as I said before, these bugs, how these sentient beings are looked at as bugs, as insignificant vermin, because that is what caused their extermination in the end, I believe. When it comes to the first stage, classification, this stage basically states that the differences between these people and normal people, humans, aren't respected. There's an othering of them. This can be stereotypes in real life, things like that. But with the Geonosians, I would say this is an already existing norm. They do not play a part in the main story, and when they do, they are overlooked and presented as bugs, as these other beings. And I know, in Star Wars, they are pretty gross. They live in caves. They have brainworms and parasites, and that's how sometimes they control people. And they're warriors. They promote war. But I'm going to explore how genocide, the extermination of an entire species, is not justified by that. Stage 2 is symbolisation. This is a visual representation, a visual manifestation. It's an already existing norm because the Geonosians look very visually different. So this is basically an author's decision. This is the writer's decision to make the Geonosians look different, to make them look gross. The Geonosians were the original design for B-1 battle droids, so there's an already pre-existing kind of hatred for them during the years of the Republic. They're the face of the Clone Wars, so it only makes sense. Stage 3 is discrimination. This is when the dominant group, or the government specifically, creates policies and denies rights to that minority. In Star Wars, I believe that this occurs in and before the Phantom Menace. This is what causes them to join the Separatists. First, the Confederacy of Independent Systems. Why did the Geonosians join the Separatists? Because they wanted to combat the Republic. Because the Republic was taxing them excessively. If you go into the lore of Star Wars, the galaxy map is a very effective way of representing class divide. The Outer Rim worlds are the lower class. They're the ones with the raw resources, the raw materials. The inner worlds are the more developed ones, like Coruscant, Alderaan, although Alderaan was eventually destroyed, Naboo. These more developed worlds, which do not have to worry about slavery, crime, gangs, things like that. The Outer Rim territories, like Tatooine, like Geonosis, were the ones that were underdeveloped, were the ones that had to give to the Republic, and they didn't get much out of it. This is a real representation of the world. It is. That is why they joined the Separatists. That is why they started a war. They were denied rights. Stage 4, Dehumanization. In this stage, those others, the minorities, the Geonosians, for example, are treated with no form of human rights or dignity. So this is a social response to the government denying them rights. There's many in-world examples of this, but I'll just talk about the Geonosians. The clones in the Clone Wars call them bugs. And in the Darth Vader Annual 2, I found this quote. Vader says that the Geonosians are a servant species. They are forbidden from breeding freely. Now, I don't know the context of that issue, but I do know that definitively a genocide can be defined as prohibiting a specific ethnicity, in Star Wars a species, from populating, from reproducing. So that's something to think about. And also, during the Clone Wars in Season 2, Episode 5, Ki-Adi-Mundi, this is a very controversial and very well-known trait of Ki-Adi-Mundi that makes him unlikable. He orders the use of flamethrowers in the second battle of Geonosis. Flamethrowers. It's a war crime. That is a war crime. And it's the most painful thing that anyone can experience. If a species is sentient, if we can assume that they feel pain and feel emotion like any other being, like a human, would it be moral to kill them by setting them on fire? Is that not something you do to mold on the wall to vermin as pest control? Even pest control don't do that. But yeah, that's just another example. The Geonosians were treated like bugs. And yeah, they are giant bugs visually. But that doesn't mean that they have the brain capacity of a bug. They literally have societies. They literally have politics. They have a government. They have a culture. They're beings like anyone else. Stage 5. Organization. Genocides are always planned. They have to be. Whether that's a conscious choice or not is a different question. But there has to be stages to them. There has to be policies and social changes to bring about that act. Training has to often be done to carry that out. And so in Star Wars, the militarization of the Republic during the Clone Wars, it is literally called the Clone Wars, not the Droid Wars. It's about the Republic. The clones were created for that purpose, to make the Republic more powerful. And of course they were, decommissioned after the Clone Wars. But the militarization, the creation of clones, is a process of carrying out a genocide. The main reason was to carry out the genocide of the Jedi. And if you would count the Jedi as a religion, then that is also a genocide, which was a successful one, Order 66. This militarization made the Republic more powerful, So eventually, when it was transferred into an empire, it had enough power to carry on genocides. A further part of this organisation and transference into a totalitarian regime, the Galactic Empire, was in 0 BBY, during A New Hope. This is separate from the Geonosian Genocide. During A New Hope, the Senate was completely dissolved. So that was the final point of it becoming totalitarian. Palpatine was in full control after that, and he arguably was pretty much in full control before that. Everyone was just a yes man at that point. But he won. At that point, he got full control of the galaxy. No one could say no. Stage 6, Polarisation. This is where propaganda starts to spread against that specific group of people. The Geonosians aren't a great example for this, because the Geonosians are such background characters, are so treated and seen as vermin that they aren't even thought about. And yeah, they're on a different planet. They don't really affect the Empire, and that might be a factor. But they didn't need to spread propaganda, because the beliefs about the Geonosians being animalistic, being vermin, being just simple bugs with no thought process, was already believed. People already thought that. In the episode Ghosts of Geonosis, I think part 2, Saw Gerrera, the rebel that was a lot more aggressive in his liberation, treated the last surviving Geonosian violently. He was pushing him around. He was very close to beating him up, and he even was threatening to shoot the last surviving Queen Egg. The last surviving Geonosian Queen Egg. He was threatening to shoot that because he thought the last surviving Geonosian was lying to him. That he had some sort of secret that he was hiding. He wasn't. This just shows some distrust. Even in the rebels, everyone hates Geonosians. Stage 7, Preparation. Perpetrators start to plan the genocide. This is just before. This is getting up to the actual atrocity. They often use euphemisms. The Nazis use the phrase "the final solution" to cloak their real intentions. The only example I could think about this was that we find out that the Geonosians in Rebels were forced to stay on their home planet to help create the Death Star. This eventually, and I'll talk about this in a bit, this was when the Empire threatened them with gas bombs and eventually used them. At this point, they were slaves to the Empire. They were helping them create the Death Star with nothing in return. They were threatened. There was nothing they could do about it. Stage 8, Persecution. This is the identification stage. Lists are drawn up. They find out who they are, where they're from, and they start capturing them. Again, this is when they were told to stay on Geonosis. Their work meant nothing in the end, because they got nothing in return. And the final stage is Extermination. The hate group, the Empire, murders that species, murders the entire group, the ethnicity, the religion, the race, in a deliberate campaign of violence. Millions of lives are destroyed, and that is what happened. We learn in Rebels Season 2, Episode 17, that the Geonosian population has been completely wiped out when they do a scan of the planet. And in Season 3, Episode 12 and 13, Ghosts of Geonosis, we learn that they were gassed with bombs to sterilize and kill them. And we learn that this was to keep the construction of the Death Star a secret. It's important to note, this is an important distinction, okay? When it comes to a genocide, it doesn't matter whether the act of genocide is intended to kill off the population because they are that ethnicity, because they are that religion. If the act and the result kills off that population, it's a genocide. If it is solely that population, it's a genocide. And that just brings the question. When this entire planet of Geonosis was destroyed, albeit one Geonosian and a queen egg, did Obi-Wan feel their pain through the Force, just like he felt the pain of the Alderaan population when they were blown to pieces? And secondly, did the rebellion put in nearly as much effort to stop the Empire as they did when the Empire blew up Alderaan? Now that second one, yeah, you can assume, okay, they were going to destroy Yavin. But in this question, you really have to think both of those genocides were overlooked. Alderaan and Geonosis were never mentioned, really at all, after their action, after their event. I think Leia mentions in passing the death of her parents at the end of A New Hope, but it's never explored again. The hundreds of millions of lives that were cut short on Geonosis and Alderaan were never faced again. They were never brought up. They were never respected. They were never paid tributes to. They were forgotten. Finally, the last stage post-genocide is denial. The perpetrators deny the existence of their atrocities. In Season 2, Episode 17, going back again, when Kallus and Zeb have to work together to escape this planet that they crashed into, Kallus says that he never asked questions. There's something to be said about that. It was this same Kallus that murdered nearly Zeb's entire species. Finally, the extermination of their race, of the Geonosians, was never mentioned in Star Wars canon after Rebels. We are led to believe that they died out, but there is optimism because there was a queen egg left. But we are led to believe that their entire species died out, and there was nothing to mention their result. And arguably the same with Alderaan. Arguably the same with Zeb's species. All of these species in Star Wars who are destroyed for the sake of the Empire's goals, we never really grasp the pain that they went through. And I think it's important to bring that up because genocide is a very, very prevalent social issue at the moment. It's not a social issue. It's a war crime. And we need to talk about it in the media more, because in the media lies the truth.